Tuesday morning, folks. It's always awesome to see you smiling faces first thing in the morning. Um, it's a beautiful sunny day. Haven't we had some wonderful weather lately? I think if we ever go back into the cold and snowy weather again, I think I might just stay in bed. Um, I'm just not going to get out because I've had enough of it and I'm ready for the sun so we can do some fun things outside. And speaking of outside, our theme the last few weeks has been talking about the city of Cambridge, where, post-pandemic optimism is starting to, and maybe that could be because of the weather, I think, certainly from my perspective. We see vaccines going into arms. We know that there will be, brighter days ahead if all of the data is correct. We should all have our first jab by, the first day of summer, and that's going to give us probably enough protection where public health will say, let's start working towards a more normal uh, condition in economics and in business and in shopping and in doing all the fun things that we like to do. So while it might not be a perfectly normal summer, I think there's good optimism to say that it's going to be probably as close as we can possibly get to. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. So we need to speak about what we're going to do going forward. And James Goodram has presented to City Council his plan. James, of course, is the Director of Economic Development for the City of Cambridge. James and I work closely together all of the time on different initiatives that are happening to grow our community's economic base and keep a vibrant and prosperous economic engine just fueling away here in the community. So James is going to give us a little presentation. First of all, takes about 15 minutes or so. He'll go over what he presented to City Council. And I'll have some questions, of course, as I always do, because I love to question people who are presenting neat and new things for our community. But also, we'll open it up in the chat, and Lisa is here. She can follow along and guide me, make sure I don't miss anybody's questions in the chat going forward. So, with that, I will turn it over to Mr. James Goodram, the Director of Economic Development for the City of Cambridge. James, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Greg. So yeah, we took a report to council on March 16th, and that was our Cambridge Economic Response Plan. So that was really all the things that we at City Hall have done over the past year to try and support our residents and businesses. And that transcends every department, every division, from our finance to our clerks to our public works people, right? So we've really tried to create a kind of a patio culture and support restaurants and those businesses with physical distancing and outdoor dining. One of the early things that we did was kind of shop from home and dine from home experience maps. That was very well received. We've had tens of thousands of people view that webpage and hopefully use the restaurants and shops locally. And some of the other things, we've done around parking enforcement and obviously tax deferrals and municipal accommodation tax deferrals. So we've done a lot of things at City Hall that I think have helped out. There's, one thing that I learned and really saw that I was kind of surprised about is different sectors of the economy have been affected differently. That's for sure. We've had a pretty good year manufacturing wise. We've had a lot of new businesses come to the community. We have businesses looking at the community. The city's invested in new infrastructure to open up industrial lands. We're currently servicing 400 acres of land, so that should be on market in the next several months. And those property owners, they're already marketing their properties. So we're hoping to see anywhere from 5 to 6 developments happening this year in that area. Plus, there's other areas in the city where we've had some interest in building new employment uses. But one of the areas, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody, is the hospitality, tourism, our hotels, accommodations. They've really been impacted by this. Obviously, we're talking about revenues dropping down to 80–90% of what they were. And so it's definitely been a different experience for different sectors of the economy. But one of the things I wanted to present to you today, the city's had a history of offering core area support to properties in our three core areas of Hespeler, Galt, and Preston. So I have a quick presentation today to provide everybody for information. And what it's going to show is it will show the current programs that we've had in place since the mid-90s to late 90s, and the programs that we're proposing to put in place going forward, with the target date of going to council for approval of May 25th this year, and then it will have to go to the Minister of Municipal Affairs after that. And so we're hoping to have that approval all in place end of June, so these new programs can hit the streets for summertime. And so I'll just share my screen here. And Greg, let me know if when I'm clicking through the slides that they're actually changing, because I had an issue yesterday, a year into this and a year into Zoom meetings, that I was sailing along, clicking slides. They were changing on my screen, but on no one else's. So
we'll let you know.
Okay. Okay, can you see our first shot here of downtown Galt?
That's a beautiful picture.
So that's actually from the Elixir patio. And it's looking at 15 Main Street where the boardwalk is. And that's been a building that's been vacant for, well, probably a decade now. And we have a local developer or business owner who's acquired that and is working with a local architect to redevelop it as we speak. So, have some sort of commercial use on the ground floor and then create some residential units on the upper floors. Just really quickly, we're allowed to, there's the municipal act says you can't bonus businesses. Through the Planning Act, we're allowed to provide loans and grants to property owners for physical improvements. So that's how we're doing this. So this is for actual physical improvements to the building. This isn't for tables and chairs and those sorts of things that can be moved or what have you. These are for the actual physical pieces that stay. So, new brickwork, new windows, new doors, that sort of thing. So the program currently and will continue to apply to our three core areas. So this is our Galt core area. So we have Dixon Park here, the Waterscape Towers in this location, Galt Memorial Arena, and then down here where Main and Ainsley meet, and 96 Grand Avenue, the former Tiger Brand building that's now home to Grand Innovations, and then of course the part of the Gaslight District development. Going to Preston, so it's properties on either side of King Street. Oh, kind of from Dolph Street up to where the former Preston Springs sat. And then Hespeler Village is a bit of a smaller area, so we're actually undertaking a review to see if we should expand that a little bit further to pick up some of these properties on Sheffield Street, as well as the former Lens Mill property and such in this area. Oh, there's somebody that would like to get, oh, you admitted them. Okay, great. So we have 5 new programs that we're proposing, and I'll walk you through them. The first 4 programs are stackable, so they can be used in combination with each other. And the 5th one's really for those large developments where you really change the assessment of your property. It could be a parking lot or a vacant site. And we'll show you a real life example of how it would work on the HIP project that took place up in Hespeler. So it's kind of confused. It says tax increase based equivalent grant program. In a nutshell, what that is, if you're paying $1,000 in property tax today, you redevelop your site, your property taxes go up to $2,000. That's a $1,000 increment in your property taxes. And we have the ability to grant back a portion of that tax increase. And we'll be proposing 75%. So So that would be, you would receive a $750 grant back every year for 5 years. And one of the other things that, people forget is the region and the city councils have supported the continuation of the development charge bylaw exemption for the core areas. And I'll show you how some of those numbers add up. So our first program is a commercial property improvement grant. So this is really a facade improvement program, and it's 50-50 matching funds. And for a traditional 25 front footage building in the core, it's a maximum of $15,000. If you have one of those properties has a lot more frontage, we go to $600 per linear foot, matching up to $25,000. Obviously, a corner building would have more frontage, so we have a cap of $30,000. If you're a heritage designated building, you add another $5,000 to that. Or if you're a building or a building with river frontage, an additional $5,000 for the facade works. This is an example of a building that's currently under redevelopment. Noah Jensen, chamber member, and he's moved his law practice into the former Kiwi building across from City Hall. He's about probably 70% complete his works now. The tables will show you on the left-hand side the current program, and then on the right-hand side is what we're proposing. So he applied under the current program, obviously, for $43,000 worth of work. The maximum funding is $25,000. It's 50-50. So he didn't hit the $50,000 of eligible work. He had $43,000. So half of that is $21,709. And he is receiving a grant of $7,500 and a loan of $14,000. That's repayable over 3 years at 0% interest. So we're getting away from the loan part of the program. A lot of people just take the grant. We've had issues with financial institutions in that we've ended up in first place on the mortgage documents, and they've had us subordinate, obviously, to second spot if there were anything to happen. So it just kind of complicates things, and a lot of people, when you start talking about registering this as a mortgage for a small amount, it's they get concerned with putting these things on their titles, property titles. In addition, so under the new program, straight grant, you'd be eligible for the full $21,709 as a grant instead of a loan of mix and grant. And as I said, programs are stackable. So we currently have a program that rebates, well, actually doesn't rebate, we just do not collect fees, permit fees. So you receive total permit fee waivers of $8,000 as well, and would continue to do so under the new program. So the next one, this is for your straight commercial buildings like Terry Pollinek's Milestone Integrated Building at the corner of Ainsley and Main. So ground floor retail, upper floor office. We provide a 50-50 matching grant up to $100,000. So an example would be Cliff Rago's building here, the former courthouse, where he undertook a huge redevelopment of that renovation. And now it's home to Crunch Fitness as well as Subway and some other tenants in there as well. I think there's a bakery. So his previous funding, so $1.1 million. We removed the caps on this one because it was so significant to the core areas revitalization. So he ended up with a grant in the amount of $66,000 and a loan of almost $124,000. So under the new program, he could apply for the facade and receive a grant of $25,000. Now we're including interior works under this new program. So he spent $2 million of interior work. The maximum funding amount is $100,000. So combining the two together, he would realize a grant in the order of $125,000. As well, he had the development charge waiver of $1,600 and building permit fee waivers of $24,000. The next programs are mixed use program, and that's your traditional Main Street. So that's your ground floor commercial and your upper floors residential. Our goal is to have more people living and working downtown. We want to see those upper floors of the buildings along our main streets occupied with apartment units, more affordable type units for people. We know what the housing market's like and where it's headed in Waterloo region. So definitely have a concern around attainable and affordable living accommodations. So this is a 50% grant up to $50,000 for that commercial piece on the ground floor, and then $10,000 per unit up to a maximum of $100,000 for each residential unit created. So that would be a combined total of $150,000 potentially under this program. This, you'll see, it's actually being worked on right now. This is on Lower Main. 2 buildings that have long been vacant. They've been acquired by a new local development interest. And you're going to see these, as I said, they're doing demolition work, but you'll see the redevelopment of these properties over the next several months. So under this one, under the current program, you can see the total amount of eligible work is almost $210,000. Half of that, almost $105,000. So a mix of loan and grant between a grant of almost $37,000 and a loan of $68,000. So under the new program, they'd be eligible for the facade. So a grant of $30,000. They're spending over $1 million. This is a $2 million redevelopment between the 2 buildings. So about $1 million per building. So in the interior works, they're spending almost $1 million. So the maximum funding amount would be $150,000 for the commercial space on the ground floor, as well as the 8 residential units that they're creating. Because they're not going to the max of 10 units, they're doing 8. That reduces that to $80,000 instead of $100,000. So they could receive a grant combined of $160,000. As I said, waiver of application fees, so no zoning bylaw amendments, no official plan amendments, no minor variances, building permits. All those fees are waived for core area properties, and we'll continue to waive them. And here we get to the tax increase based equivalent grant program. I never get used to saying that. I always call it a TIG, but anyways. So as I said earlier, we're proposing to rebate 75% of that city portion of the tax increase over a 5-year period. And I'm sure we have somebody from HIP here. This was a project that added rental housing to Hespeler. It was a real game changer for the Hespeler core area. We've added many, many residents. I'm not sure how many people live in there, but we've definitely added to the vitality of the Hespeler core with this rental apartment and the work that they did next door in the former Riverbanks building. I'm pretty sure it's fully occupied now, and those were condominiums. As you can see on the table in the top left, the previous assessment was $1.5 million for the property. The new assessment, residential, is $30,668,000, and the new assessment commercial is $355,000 for a combined total of a new assessment going from the existing $1.5 million to 31 million, over $31 million assessment increase. The top right, you'll see the region, school, and city portions. The city portion of property taxes is 25%, just over 25%. In the bottom left of the table, you'll see that in 2016, the taxes payable to the city, region, and school boards was almost $51,000. As a result of the redevelopment, those taxes went up to $372,000. The city portion before the development was $12,769. It went up to $93,000. So if you go to the right, that's an increase of $80,861. And as I said, we're proposing to grant back 75% of that tax increase. So that would be $60,646 if this project were to go through this new program today. Obviously, it's been developed, so it's not eligible anymore. They were eligible for some other programs, but this just provides a good example of the kind of project that this program is targeted to. So you can see that would be a total tax increment grant of $303,000 over 5 years post-development. The property was also granted a development charge waiver of $1.362 million and building permit fee waivers of almost $82,000. So these really changed the economics of doing renovations and redevelopments in core areas, because it is more costly, especially when you're renovating buildings. You have to take parts apart by hand. It's more labor intensive. Downtown developments, you have very little staging space. Your costs basically go up. And the whole intent of these programs is trying to level the cost between working in your downtown cores and that greenfield development. Greenfield development's a lot easier. It's all new construction. You usually have a lot of space to work and stage. Downtown's just a lot more complicated, and you're dealing with building materials like lead paint and asbestos and those sorts of things. So that is the programs in a nutshell. So I'll just turn back to Greg. I'll stop sharing here.
You know, it's really interesting trying to figure out over the years, even back in my time on council in the early 90s, trying to find that magic bullet that would inspire growth and, you know, redevelopment opportunities that existed in all three of our cores back then has always been the challenge, James. And you know, I think you know, there really, I think in the past, we've looked, I almost have to look for a special type of developer that has broad ranging experience at redeveloping in core areas. Because as you alluded to, you know, costs are dramatically higher. Well, we all know that, right? When you renovate your house, you do something in your house and all of a sudden you peel back that drywall and you say, oh my goodness, you've uncovered, you know, a myriad of problems. That same type of thing happens regularly. I think we all saw that or heard about that in the redevelopment of the old post office into the new digital library, where, you know, these unexpected challenges come up. But the fact of the matter is, we have to have vibrant, strong cores of our community, because that's the foundation of our community. That's where it all started. And it's migrated out, and you know, there's only so much between the developed lands in Cambridge now and the borders of the community. There's only so much greenfield space, so we have to start looking internally to see where we can capitalize and maximize the benefits that we have. Do you think that that in this program that you've outlined, which seems to be on the surface, and I'll get into that in a little bit, seems to be pretty extensive benefits to attracting development downtown. Do you think that that it's going to probably open up a significant amount of inquiries and individuals coming in to say, yeah, I want to take this property and I want to redevelop this property? Do you think that you're going to have a lineup basically of individuals wanting to develop in the downtown cores?
Well, that would definitely be the goal. There's no doubt about that. And one of the things that we'll do, we have a great team at City Hall. You know, our planners, our engineers, our building folks, and we'll do the hand holding, right? So anybody that comes in that's interested in these, you know, these programs, we'll definitely kind of triage them at economic development and start that process. But one of the things, so it's not just what we're doing with this program. It's kind of a combination of all the things we're doing at the city. So we're spending a lot of time doing some studies in the downtown, height studies, land use studies, in terms of setting those regulations and policies so developers and property owners know what it is they can build. Obviously, one of our goals is to have LRT downtown. So we've finalized working with the region. We know what that route is going to be. And we're doing what they call transit station planning around those areas. So what could it be? We have our downtown ambassador team looking after the cleanliness. We have out of our clerks and our bylaw enforcement team, we have enhanced security downtown for that safety factor. So it's all these things working together, I think, that are really going to, there's no one silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of all these things that we're doing. And from the financial perspective, I expect and I really hope that these programs that we're offering kind of cover off that financial piece to encourage development. Because you're right, Greg. If you think, and you've traveled a lot with your chamber organization to American cities, and that you don't go to the suburbs when you explore a new city. People go downtown, right? And so the core areas and the health of the core areas is really, I think, a reflection on the health of the entire city as well. So yeah, it's going to be important, and we have some developers that definitely jumped in early and took greater risks to do some of the projects that we're seeing under construction right now and some of the renovation works that are happening. So they're kind of ahead of the curve. And I know just because of them, the inquiries have gone up. People are, you need those kind of early adopters, if you want to call it that, people that have come in and taken the risk, made the investment, and acted as a catalyst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you also have to seize the opportunity. There's a lot of developers that have expertise in dealing with downtown core reconstruction projects and renovation projects that like not every single one is interested in doing that because they don't have experience at it. One of the things you mentioned was the height limit, and I think it kind of parlays into our heritage value, which really brings the aesthetic value of our downtown core. I bring visitors into town. We come over the hill by Waterscape, and all of a sudden it almost takes their breath away. For me, it happens every single day. I drive down there, so I almost don't pay attention to it. But when you bring a visitor who's never been here before and they come over that hill and they go, "My gosh, this is so European looking. This is so unbelievable looking." And you say, well, yeah, yes, you're right. It's absolutely gorgeous. We don't pay attention to it. So the preservation of our heritage buildings is going to be key and central to it. But the height restriction is a real serious issue for redevelopment, because we got one big challenge down there, and I think HIP developments experience that. All of them have experienced it, but HIP in particular experienced it in the Gaslight District. The bedrock is so close to the surface that it's very difficult to put in underground parking, if not, financially impossible. So the first, 4 or 5 floors of any building is going to be parking. And, so, now you can't have a restriction of 5 floors, because how can you make a viable project work if you can't put in the underground parking that's going to be required for it, especially if it's residential? So how do you think we can do that in developing a strategy to rebuild or take advantage of the opportunities that are down there, but also be sensitive to the heritage buildings that are there, to make sure that we capitalize on that redevelopment with the value of our aesthetics of downtown? How do you think we can work through that?
Well, we have some great examples of mixing new construction with the heritage property. So obviously the Gaslight District's a good example of that. One of the early ones, I think, is City Hall, building Canada's first LEED Gold municipal building adjacent to historic City Hall, and how that connection was made is another great example. And I don't think anybody's looking for height and density along, if we look at Galt, specifically, nobody's looking at height and density right on Main Street. It's as you move further out towards, such as the Gaslight District, the former Dixon Bowl site, Cambridge Mill, for example. They'll be coming in with an exciting project in the next month or so. So I think, one of the big selling features obviously is our heritage, and the heritage in the core areas. And that's something that has attracted developers to the community. So I think they're very sympathetic to the heritage, and they're using, that's part of their market. It's part of their brand. It definitely is with the Gaslight District, for example. So I think that's, part of what you're going to see. Part of the study we're doing obviously is recognizing that we have the bedrock issue to deal with. And as you said, we can't go down for parking. It's cost prohibitive. It's all about economics and market conditions. Right now, it's cost prohibitive to blast through bedrock if you can and provide for parking. So that's part of what we're looking at. And it's really, as I said, it's an interplay of all those different things that we're doing. We want LRT. Well, to make the business case for LRT, we need density. And density translates into height. So we're going to need greater heights in the core while respecting heritage. And I think, there are lots of opportunities kind of as you move away from that main Ainsley water corridor that we can accommodate greater heights. And I'm thinking down, as I said, Dixon Bowl, that whole area there, as well as even on the other side of the river where we're located. We have a couple large parking lots near us. So yeah, I think that's how you're going to see it translate over time. But it's not heritage or height; it's both. So it's kind of that interplay. How do you connect them and make sure that both are respected? We respect heritage while we're still trying to achieve some of our goals at the city, and that's density and support for higher order transit.
Yeah, it's there's lots of examples around North America how they have built up their downtowns. We have a land use planning policy in the province of Ontario that says we've got to intensify our cores. We got to go up instead of out. So it's playing into all the rules and regulations that we have, both right across the province. But I think there are some great examples around the world we could look at where they have sensitively, but very deliberately built up their core districts with people. And that's created a lot of benefit. And Pat Mullaney puts in, he's asking some questions that, probably isn't at anybody's fingertip, but the target population density for LRT zone development, what is the current population density for LRT zone of stage 2 ion? He is absolutely correct. We will not qualify to get that LRT extension, any of the government supports federally and provincially, if we don't have the density down there to really, put all the numbers together that says, yes, it's warranted to put LRT in. I know Hespeler Road is probably going to be the most transformed strip
Sure.
once LRT comes in. The opportunity for redevelopment and growth out there is just exponential to probably any part of the LRT system throughout the region of Waterloo. Hespeler Road is the big nut, I think, once it comes. But I think downtown Cambridge, given the fact that the LRT goes and butts up against Fairview Park Mall and butts up against Conestoga Mall, having it terminate in our downtown core is going to be the big value add from Cambridge's perspective. And if we don't have the opportunity to build that growth down there to warrant it coming, I think we're going to lose out on something that could be pretty magnificent for the city of Cambridge. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh no, for sure. And it's not just downtown Cambridge Galt area. It's the LRT is going to touch the top of the Preston core area, and I know the Preston BIA and are very excited about the opportunity that LRT will bring, especially in that area around that transit station stop, King Street and Eagle Street. In that area, there's a lot of opportunity for higher density development. And we took, well, it's probably going to be 2 years ago now because we've had this last year with the pandemic, but we had a nice walk. Councillor Mann joined us and our planning staff and our engineering staff, and we took a kind of a site visit field walk about all the opportunities that LRT could present for Preston and what we need to do in terms of getting ready for that as well. And then one of the important things too, I think people say, oh, the LRT is not going to go into the Hespeler core area. Well, that may be true, but when you put in that spine, that LRT spine, you recreate your whole transit system basically to that hub and spoke model. Basically, there's definitely talk already of having a rapid bus from the core area of Hespeler to that LRT spine. So those are all things that are still in discussion. So maybe that train may not swing its way through there, but it will definitely, there will be higher order transit, and those connections are going to be so important to making the LRT work and be successful. And as you said, Hespeler Road, we had a minister's zoning order. Smart centers came in. They're looking at like 10,000 units over a 20-year period on their site. You know, that's one site. You go all the way down Hespeler Road and you look at that traditional kind of suburban North American construction, one-story buildings, single-use buildings, and a sea of parking. There is a lot of opportunity to add people to this community and different types of housing, right? That everybody's looking for. Not everybody's looking for that single-family home.
Yeah.
Not everybody's looking for a car, to own a car. So, you know, when we have the better transit and maybe an apartment or a condo or whatever, we're opening ourselves up to a different market and different talent for our business community as well.
Yeah, no, and you know, people need to be, you know, I think we all clearly understand that, you know, you put the LRT in, and then as years progress, there are spines coming from it, and it gets extended. You can look at LRT systems all over the world that, you know, they didn't put it all in at one time. You have to put it in pieces and sections as demand comes up. One of the questions that Pat also asked, which was a question I was going to ask, is the costs of these and their impact on the city. Is there already a funding pot for some of these initiatives for that in your presentation?
Yeah, so for all the granting programs, that is all funded from the Core Area Transformation Fund Reserve. So obviously, I don't want to say that's not taxpayer money. It is taxpayer money, but it's in a reserve account, so there is no effect on the levy at this point. With respect to the tax increment equivalent grant program, so that doesn't have a tax levy effect in that it's rebating a portion of the tax increase. So if the person didn't do that development, we wouldn't have the tax increase anyway, so we wouldn't have anything to grant back. Now,
so it's basically deferring that revenue down the road, kicking the football down the road a little bit, and plan for it as it comes in, I suppose.
Well, and I think with that is we're increasing the, you know, or we're providing that tax grant back. But when you look at the effect, for example, that project in Hespeler has had on the neighboring properties, it's definitely lifted property values and assessments in the area. So some of that, you know, would be offset in that regard. The development charge waiver, that's definitely something that we budget. I don't have the specific number now, and I know our CFO's here, but I'm not putting anybody on the spot. Miss Cheryl Ayers, and but that is something that we budget for annually, and that we can get back to Patrick about. I just don't have the number at our fingertips right now.
No, and you know, I think obviously that all goes into the factor. I think it would be so difficult, you know, to put. Dave Calder would probably be pulling the rest of his hair out of his head if he had to calculate what the anticipated amount of cost would be. You need to balance. You need to have a reserve account set up that you draw from for these cases, because you could never predict down the road what this is going to end up costing. So
actually, Cheryl jumped right on this story, Greg. Cheryl wrote that city's budget includes $1.35 million for wave development charges, and it's based on a 5-year historical amount.
Yeah.
There.
Thanks,
Cheryl.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Cheryl. That was awesome. We appreciate your input on that. But I think it's, you know, important. Let's get a little bit away from the downtown core. That's really important, no question. But the Preston core and the Hespeler cores are fundamentally important commercial districts, economic districts as well. You know, I probably know the Preston core a little bit better than I would know the Hespeler core. Hespeler core seems to be really rebounding nicely. Like it, you know, even prior to the pandemic, obviously, you know, with the injection down there. But there's also a lot of interest. Forefathers Brewing, they've got some plans because they're a little bit of a development company on the side as well, or one of their owners are. Like there's going to be some pretty exciting things happen, I think, in Hespeler. But what can happen in Preston?
So I don't want to leave Hespeler just yet. I'll get to Preston in a moment, but if you go into Hespeler today, you'll see that there's new construction right there at the corner of Adam and Queen. So that's concept developments, and they're actually, I think it's a 4 or 5 story apartment building that they're building, and they did one in Preston about 5 years ago on Eagle Street too. So that's when I talk about catalysts. So you have some early adopters, if you want to call it that, HIP coming in, and that property had sat vacant for many years. And it was funny because I believe it or not, I've had a couple people complain about people hanging around in Hespeler out on the sidewalks and on their phones and that. The person said your program of downtown renewal isn't working for me. Now we have all these people just hanging around. That was kind of the goal. So I guess to each their own, right? So we have too many people in Hespeler now, apparently, but that was our goal, because that's what's going to support the businesses that are there in the shops. And Forefathers Brewing was, a company that came in early. We do have some proposals down the street as well for more residential development that you'll hear about over the next few months. So adding more people there. And in Preston, I've been really happy because one of the properties that's driven me crazy since, for a long time now, was the former 7-Eleven in the gas station. That property's finally listed for sale now. So we've, the realtor put the economic development office phone number and contact information in there as well for the incentive program. So we've had some contacts from people looking at doing different projects there. So that would be really nice to see that. That's a key site. It would be nice to see something of substance go there. I guess one of the issues with that site is apparently there's a restrictive covenant that they don't want residential there. So we're working with Imperial Oil to have that restrictive covenant lifted so we could see a nice mixed use building at that property. But Preston, when we went for our walk, and for those of you who are familiar with it, you obviously have your buildings right along the street edge. But then in behind, there's some parking areas, some fairly large parking areas. Well, just think about maintaining that historic street front. But as you move back, you can have a taller, higher building there in that parking area. And then you have staging space and construction space too to do that. So that would kind of be our vision, maintain that heritage front wall, you want to call it, along the street edge, but as you move back, you build a new structure kind of over top and behind, and increase density that way, all the way along that King Street spine.
Yeah.
And then when you get up by Eagle Street, there's obviously a lot of opportunity there for new development and new buildings and having people live there.
Yeah. I've seen that step back use in a couple of cities that I visited, and I can't remember the names of them right now in the US, but it was kind of neat because that's exactly what they intended to do, was to preserve the original look of the streetscape. And then when they set the buildings back and took them up higher, really visually, when you were walking down the street, you could hardly see them. They didn't come into focus. The main street or the original streetscape was always in focus, where the other buildings in behind just kind of grew up, and that's where the people live.
And when you're standing on the street, you only see 4 stories.
Yeah.
Maybe 6, right? So unless you turn your head right up, you're not going to notice the rest.
I think it was maybe somebody from the mill proposal that I was talking to, and he was saying to me that actually you lose concept of the height of building once they get over 16 stories. So up to 16 stories, you can kind of look up and say, wow, that's a tall building. But anything above that, it doesn't make any more difference. So, it doesn't feel any different as you're walking down the street. When I was on council back in the 90s, everybody used to say we were obviously concerned about our core districts there. Malls were the rage. Strip plazas that we see all over the place were the thing to build. So downtown cores were really concerned, especially the merchants that had businesses down there. And I can remember having this debate, and we talked about it, and people would ask me, Greg, you're the Preston councillor, how come Preston Town Center, how come the core district in Preston, was always full? There were very few vacancies ever. We had, even when we had turnover, it was turnover hand down to the family. And I said, well, the real difference is that the Preston core district backs onto residential. Yeah. It's where everybody lives. So, I can remember doing a little project up there. We found out that about a 12 block radius of the Preston core was where the biggest volume, about 80 to 90% of the customers were. Mm-hmm. So it really tells a story of what's important to cores, that people need to live there. And I think that was always the problem in downtown, was there wasn't very many people that lived there. The residential component was always pushed outside the core, and there was very little residential component to support the merchants in downtown that were actually living there. And I think that's so important. If we want to have a strong and vibrant core from an economic perspective, if we want to have a safer core, we need to get people buying condominiums or renting apartments in the downtown and living that kind of life, because there's lots of people that do. So I think whatever we can do to bolster development in the core districts, to bring people to the core, is going to have nothing but positive effects for everybody.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, and some of the other investments we've made, when you talk about drawing people in from residential areas, the city's made investments in the streetscape works and trying to create that nice environment. And part of that too is the city kind of putting, if you're expecting people, private sector, to invest money in their properties, you better be investing in the public space as well, and maintaining it. And I think the city's really showing a commitment towards that, especially with our ambassador team and some of the equipment we've purchased there to keep our cores clean and safe. So that's something we'll continue to do over time. And that is the revitalization strategy, is having people living there, more eyes on the street, and some of those safety concerns will go away over time. Sure.
I think, we've talked about it here actually during the pandemic, oddly, but we're always looking down the road beyond the pandemic about putting a group together to go around and look at communities and see what they've done. Some really interesting communities. I was a couple of times in Burlington, Vermont. A really good friend of mine runs the chamber there, and I've been to a couple of programs there. But there's an incredible example of revitalizing a core town of 35,000 people. Every weekend, population doubles. They shut down 8 blocks of their street with bollards. They bring in buskers every weekend. It's literally like it's like going to Disney World when you walk down that street, because you're almost shoulder to shoulder. But it was an investment that the city made a number of years ago to say, how can we transform? How can we make something unique? How can we expose our community? And more importantly, give opportunity for economic prosperity and growth. But there's great examples of initiatives that have happened. And yeah, sometimes it's a little bit, they maybe seem a little quirky, but I can remember years ago, David will remember this, David Calder will remember this, when, there was a proposal to put a Teflon roof over the entire downtown core of some sort. I can't remember whether it was Teflon or what it was. But, quite frankly, back then in the early 1990s or maybe late 80s, that was, we all thought that idea was kind of kooky, like, are you crazy? Like, we never said that to the individual that made the comment, but we kind of thought, man, oh man, like, you're really, like, that's so far outside the box, you can't even see the box anymore. But when you start thinking about it now, initiatives like that, thinking that maybe that far outside the box, is really what's going to be the saving grace for our core areas, what's going to give vibrancy and prosperity to our community, and give that, transforming. People want to live where they work and where they play. And maybe not my generation, but certainly the generations coming along. That's why the Gaslight District is so popular. People want to, they want to be able to have fun where they live and work. And I think that's what's going to be really important as we look down the road.
Yeah, and I go back to when we opened up the post office and that event that we had. So we created that Water Street 2 parking lot to host events and that sort of thing. We had like probably over 5,000 people downtown, and what a buzz that night with the stage and everything that happened there. So definitely post-pandemic, it would be great to see more of that happening. And then one of the things, with the council's approved a core area transformation fund. So there was 3 investment pillars, and the one pillar I talked about already, which was the financial incentives for the private sector. The other one's looking at strategic land acquisitions. And we've bought a couple properties now in the core areas that we think are key for the future growth of the cores. But the third pillar was what I call, and what was approved was like a placemaking experiential type of funding envelope. And that's for maybe not the Teflon roof all over the downtown core, but that's for where we can work with, businesses, private sector, the business improvement areas to bring some of these projects forward that create place, that create an experience. An example of creating place and creating an experience would be the digital light show at the old post office, right? So now we have a funding envelope that we have in that, and we have a whole process around it. I won't get into that, but we're looking for ideas and ways that the city can partner. Obviously, that wouldn't be entirely city funding, but partner with the private sector or the business improvement areas to create some of these experiences to draw our residents to the cores, as well as visitors.
Yeah, it's placemaking. I think we had Scott Higgins on. He kind of kicked off this whole series that we're having and talking about how we move beyond the pandemic and what we do to build our community value back up, but our livability. But I always love his comment, and I've stuck to it now since he made the comment. He said, we've always had it backwards. We always say, let's have a great community that we can live, work, and play in. But he says that's all backwards. It should be, let's create a community where we can, that's a great community to play, live, and work in. And, you look at the employee of the future, and all the companies that are coming into town that are looking to plant their footprint here, they're looking for people. They're moving here in the anticipation that they can get great people. And people want to move to communities where they can have fun in, and they're livable, and their families can enjoy living there, but that they can also have a job. And I think while we never want to put the workplace on the back burner, in most people's minds, they're looking for place first, as opposed.
Greg, you look at the great work that, and I sit on, I guess you'd call it the board or what have you, the advisory panel for the physician recruitment that the chamber's doing with, and I see Donna's on the call too. Like, when she brings visiting physicians to the community, that's what they want to see. Like, they've gone, we've given them, provided walking tours of film locations. I think the kayaking on the Grand, the restaurants, the theater, the Hamilton Family Theater, those sorts of things. So a big component of the work Donna does isn't just about showing them the hospital and talking business. A lot of it's around that family, that playing aspect, right? In the family piece, like, where will my spouse have, or partner have a job? Where would my kids go to school, and those sorts of things. So that's becoming ever more important.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting because we have the visitor center out here. Now, we're not getting visitors right now because nobody's traveling. But when we do, the inquiries of people coming in, they've got their kids in their car, and they say, where's Handmaid's Tale filmed? And where's Murdoch Mysteries filmed? And it's unbelievable. Like, people actually drive to communities and say, I want to go to where these shows have been filmed, and so the city has an awesome map that your colleague Devin has put out, so that we can send people downtown and they can go and visit these sites that they're so familiar with from their favorite TV show. And I think like anything like that is placemaking, and it's
Mm,
where people want to be. We don't want to live in if we want to live in boring communities, we'd move to Tiviotdale, where there's a corner gas station and a great restaurant, but that's about it. So we don't want to. We want to live here, and we want to have fun. We want our communities to be livable, but we want them, most importantly, to be prosperous. And all of these key things that you're working on, hopefully will yield that fruit down the road. So thanks very much this morning, James, for coming on. And
well, thank you. Appreciate it.
so James can be reached at the City of Cambridge. You can email him at goodramj@cambridge.ca if you've got any questions. He's always responsive to them. Runs a great department down there. We're so appreciative of economic development in Cambridge. We just appreciate everything that they do. So, ladies and gentlemen, next week we're going to have a surprise to watch your email. Hopefully, I'm nailing down a really exciting. Thanks to Donna Reed, Councillor Donna Reed, we're going to try and nail down a really fun interview next week with some history. Have a great week.